August the 15th, 2019. Guys, you're looking at the U.S. weather map. Now, everything's calm. Now, up in above Colorado in this area, weather's been kind of hectic the last couple of days. Guys, I think it was yesterday Colorado got record-size hail. Think about that in August. About 4.5 inches, as big as one guy was holding up one of the pieces of hail in one hand and a compact disc in the other hand, and they were the same size. You know, that's killer hail. You got to really watch it. What we've had in the south, guys, it's a little cooler today because the rain we've been getting that you see pushing out over the Gulf of Mexico came from the north. And usually when that happens, it cools off a little bit. But, guys, the storm up in the center of the nation, keep an eye on it as we go into the heat of the day. The reason I'm doing this is because there's a new updates out from the National Hurricane Center and AccuWeather, and they're talking about we're about to get a back-loaded system, which means that it's been pushed back. Because what they're saying is because of wind shear. Remember, we're talking about El Nino, and that's over with. And now the dust patterns over Africa are supposed to be calming down, and there's an oscillation period when these storms form. And we're coming to all of that now. What we're dealing with is the most dramatic 6 weeks of hurricane season leading up to the peak. We'll get into that in just a moment. But now these heat advisories, if you've kept up with this, guys, have been in this entire area for several weeks, unless there was a cool front that came in. That's kind of gone now, but you're seeing it in Nevada, and you're seeing excessive heat warnings in California, Arizona, and southern Nevada. So you pay very close attention to that. The gray areas that are inside the circle, the orange circle there, guys, those are air quality alerts, and it has to do with ozone. And they're telling everyone if you got heart conditions or lung conditions to be very careful. They're asking commuters to team up, use less gas. They're asking folks even to not use two-cycle engines during the heat of the day today, get lawnmowers and things like that. So be very careful. If you're sensitive you got heart or lung problems, that's what they're talking about here. And this is coming out of Oklahoma. It says the following statement was issued by the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality. An air quality alert for ozone has been issued for Thursday, August 15th. For the Oklahoma City metropolitan area due to expected high concentrations of ozone. Persons with existing heart or respiratory ailments should reduce physical exertion and outdoor activity. The general public is encouraged to help alleviate the problem by reducing vehicle miles, travel by riding the bus, carpooling, or avoid unnecessary trips. There's a number here at the bottom, guys, if you're in that area and you're concerned. It wasn't just the metropolitan area, but the number's there. Now, looking at the wide Atlantic view, AccuWeather, the National Hurricane Center, have come out today saying prepare for the back-loaded hurricane season. What they're saying is don't be lulled by a quiet June and July. The real Atlantic hurricane season is about to kick off. And don't forget the video a few days ago when we saw that large red donut harp-shaped ring over the storm that got wiped out in the Caribbean. They're not including that factor. It says the hurricane season runs from June 1st to the end of November, but the next 6 weeks, the season within a season, quotation marks, is regularly the most dangerous and active time for storms to develop in the Atlantic. This is coming from Dennis Feltgen, spokesman for the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. Only 2 storms have developed in the Atlantic so far this year. Dry, dusty air from African Sahara robbed potential storms of moisture, and wind shear spurred the El Nino climate systems, ripped apart budding storms. Now, those brakes on hurricane development are gone. There's still, guys, some Saharan cloud layer in there, but it says the result is a big change in the pattern over the Atlantic, going from a very lackluster, quiet weather pattern to a much more active one. The lead hurricane forecaster at AccuWeather, who is Dan Kowalski, he's State College of Pennsylvania. We are thinking this season will be backloaded. Last week, the U.S. National Weather Service forecast 10 to 17 named storms in the Atlantic. Last year there were 15, including Florence and Michael, that killed a combined 96 people and caused more than $49 billion in damage. Remember in the video again about the satellite controlling the weather? We talked about the cost of the hurricanes and how expensive it has been in the last few years. Storm is named when it reaches tropical storm strength with maximum sustained winds of at least 39 miles per hour. So far, only 2 named storms have emerged in the Atlantic this year, and only one came during the hurricane season. It was buried. We watched that one. Look back up over southern Louisiana. It's the fewest since 1999. That's the fewest named storms between June 1st and August 15th. During that period, according to Philip Clausback, a meteorologist at Colorado State University, specializing in Atlantic Basin seasonal hurricane forecasts. Subtropical storm Andrea arrived in May before the season's official start. The next one we'll start with see. It will be Cantrell. At risk is a $17 trillion in U.S. real estate along the coast. You think they may use a satellite to knock one of these out to protect the coastlines? But what happens? You superheat the Atlantic and the Gulf. It says because the hurricanes, guys, are natural cooling. That's what they do. They cool and they agitate the waters inside the Gulf of Mexico and break up some of that, the algae that we've seen, reoxygenates the area. But if you don't let that natural cooling process go on, which if you think about it, hurricane starts on the surface, it pulls this air up into super high altitudes and cools it, pulls it off the surface of the water. Again, at risk is $17 trillion in U.S. real estate, as well as some of America's most valuable commodities. More than 45% of U.S. refining capacity and 51% of gas processing is along the Gulf of Mexico coastline. Florida is the world's second largest producer of orange juice, only behind Brazil. There may be money involved, but it is a deadly game to play when you mess with the way this earth was created by our Father. It says there are 2 factors that could spur on storms in September, according to Bob Henson, a meteorologist with Weather Underground. He said the first is the so-called Madden-Julian oscillation. We talked about this, a ripple of rising and sinking air that swirls through the atmosphere about every 45 to 60 days that can spark typhoons and hurricanes when combined with other factors. It could affect the Atlantic in late August or September. That's exactly why the peak of hurricane center and season is at that time. The second is the fast-moving atmospheric system known as convectively coupled Kelvin wave that's affected by the Earth's rotation. Now, a lot of people are saying the sun is coming up a little further north than it should be this time of year. It says when one runs into a tropical wave moving off of Africa, that's when your rotation begins. You've got this Kelvin wave coming through there. You get a storm move off the African coast. They combine just like cold and hot air, make a tornado, and moving in opposite directions. It says all of this doesn't mean the Atlantic will pop to life at noon August 20th. The next 2 weeks should extend the streak of drifting doldrums across the basin. That's when this oscillation period will begin. You got 2 weeks heads up, but because of the El Nino, guys, we have to be a little watchful of the Caribbean and the Gulf. So once they start rolling, they'll look out. And remember when these storms were coming off of Africa a few weeks ago, and one after the other, that was the end of that oscillation period. It says there's a deep pool of warm water tucked into the Gulf of Mexico across the western Caribbean and along the U.S. southeast coastline. This is coming from Jim Royer, chief meteorologist at the Energy Weather Group outside Philadelphia. Any storm that reaches those areas could explode in power, he said. And what we're seeing, guys, when he's talking about exploding in power in these warm waters, normally we would have had a couple of other storms come in and pull some of this heat out. But man thinks that he is smarter than God. It says this is high-octane fuel that is all waiting in the wings for the first storm, Royer said. This is all untapped, and it will really intensify the storms. Guys, are you prepared? Are you? Guys, if you're not, get ready. Water, survival food, a couple other things we'll talk about in the next few videos. But guys, as I'm closing this, the Dow Jones is up to about 110. We'll come in if we see some rapid movement during that last 30 minutes or hour of trading at around 2 p.m. Guys, this is a heads up. Be safe.